Welcome to the Old Mac Gang Podcast, or OMG, a vodcast with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I am a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who has collected a great group of friends to talk about Apple and the seasoned citizens that use it. Let's see who we have on the panel today. Chris?
Yeah, my name is Chris Wesselman. I've been around Mac since 1984. I joined my first user group, the Apple Corps of Dallas, which is still running, and they claim they're the oldest running Mac user group. I don't know if that's totally valid or not, but at any rate, I had the very good fortune to work for Apple in the System 7 group in Austin, and worked my way up there and eventually moved out to Campbell and Cupertino until 2001. And after that, I went to work for Stanford University doing basically computer support with faculty, staff, and students in the School of Education, and retired in 2017, and I currently live in Tucson, Arizona. And I'm a member of the Tucson Mac user group now.
And we've got Peter with us. Peter?
Yeah, I'm an age-seasoned 72-year-old double retiree. I was a foundryman, and following that, a high school math teacher. I began my plunge into all things Apple in 2006, and I continue to love using very many of Apple's devices each and every day. And I am a current member of the Northeast Ohio Apple Club.
And we have with us tonight a very special guest joining us, Dave Ginsburg. Dave Ginsburg, you might know from In Touch with iOS. He's a panelist on Mac Voices Live, also the Mac Show. And what else are you into, Dave?
That's pretty much the realm of the podcast. So my name is Dave Ginsburg. I'm a seasoned IT professional. I've been working in the IT industry for almost 28 years. Currently work for a large insurance company, and well versed on both Mac and PC because I have to. Got into the Apple world around 2006. My first Mac I came at the very late end when Intel came into play on the Mac. And around 2009, I found out about Mac user groups and joined, at that time it was called the Northwest of Us in Chicago. And then it later became Suburban Chicago Apple Users. I was past president of that group for almost 11 years and retired from that group around 2021. Very proud of what I've done for that group. And, Mac user groups are kind of a fading breed, but I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that's really what my experience is. And then, of course, I've been doing my In Touch with iOS podcast for almost 9 years now, and also have spoken at Mac Stock Conference and Expo in Woodstock, Illinois, for many years, and met a lot of the folks that I know in the Apple community from there as well as the Mac user group. So, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. With us for the show, and I'm going to switch here and get us all in the panel. And Dave, I met through MacStock through the years that I've been there, and he's been on Vision Profiles because he has a new Vision Pro headset, and I'm with him now on In Touch with iOS on Thursdays. So we have a really good panel. I wanted Dave on because I know he had some long time experience with Mac user groups, and that's essentially what we're talking about tonight. We're going through this series about how do you troubleshoot and what are some of the ways that you can troubleshoot when things come up with your Mac. And I'm just curious to find out from the panel sort of what, and we can go person by person if we want to, and maybe we'll end off with Dave and let Dave have the last word on it. But curious in terms of what your experiences are with Mac user groups, any history that you've had. How did anybody know how they started? Was it just sort of organic?
I think it started back probably in the early '80s is when it got excited. Because back in those days, the internet didn't exist really. I mean, it wasn't anywhere as it is today. So that's what a lot of folks got to do. They got together, and these Mac user groups were huge. Huge. There were some. I think the Berkeley one in California was probably one of the biggest ones. Maybe probably near 1,000 members at some point, because that's what people would do. They'd meet together and talk about their interests. All of us have interests in Apple and Mac, and I wasn't in that world back in those days, but I know that that's really how I believe Mac user groups started. And it's people enthusiasts. They wanted to get together and do their thing. But as time has gone by and it's progressed, obviously lots changed, and with the advent of the internet, then the Mac user groups weren't as relevant as they used to be. But I think that's really where the origins of it came, as far as my understanding of the history.
Yeah, so somebody would get a new board or get the latest equipment,
Yeah.
and they would meet together at a library or at a community center as a group, and people would show off what they had and help other people
Right.
who had gotten and were putting together the pieces.
I know the
So,
other big
Marty,
things was shareware back in the day. If you remember shareware, we all
Yeah.
everybody in Mac user groups. Which I remember we had the shareware table at the Northwest House at the time in Chicago, and there was a gentleman there that would be managing all the CDs and that would be exchanging CDs and getting their shareware software to try out. So I know that was a big thing too with Mac user groups.
yeah, Marty, I just happened to be looking at issue number 1 of the Homebrew Computing Amateur Computer User Group Homebrew Computing Club that was in Menlo Park, California, and the first issue was March 15th, 1975.
There you go.
And so that, I think, was pretty close to the beginning. I mean, the BMUG in Berkeley got started very soon after that, I think, and BCS, Boston Computer Society, of course. And so then Apple Corp Dallas started in '78. Um, and so that was sort of the early beginning. Um, I, like I mentioned in a previous show, we'd been to see some friends in Jacksonville, Florida, and they had an Apple II. And of course, my kids, of course, once they saw that, wanted an Apple II as well. By then, it was an Apple IIe, and that was in January of 1984, the month before the Mac came out. And of course, needless to say, the next month when Steve introduced it, I thought, oh, great, here's an even better one. But then finally in November, I succumbed to the home. There was a home trial where you could take it home for the weekend, and that got me. But in any event, I had gone down to Apple Corps of Dallas just to find out, and they were all talking about programming the Apple II, and I knew that programming would never be for me. So I just sort of dropped out. But once I came back with that little beige bag and my 128K Mac in my hand, and found out that there were another 50 people all standing there with our beige bags, then, we had something going, and it immediately synergized in lots of directions. And, I really credit for learning most of my computer skills from Apple Corps.
Well, that's very cool. And, I just note that the Homebrew Computer Club long predated Macintoshes or even Apples. The two Steves who founded Apple met at the Homebrew Computer Club, and it's a place where apples were, might be the birthplace of apples.
So I'd like to ask each of you, and maybe I'm trying to remember kind of folks' origins from what I know of you, and maybe we'll go back to Peter on this one. How did you first get involved in Mac user groups?
Well, I took a circuitous route, and it involves a lot of confessions. I used a lot of other computers before I found my way to a Mac. I mean, I started with a teletype connected to a General Electric timeshare mainframe downtown Cleveland when I was in high school, and I was using batch process punch cards when I was in college. And in neither of those cases did I feel the need of a user group, because I had my fellow students, my professors, my teachers to help me out. Once I was out of school, I found my way to an Osborne CPM machine and a succession of PCs, and then I needed help. Those computers were not easy to use, and I found the Cleveland Osborne User Group. I found the Greater Cleveland PC Users Group, and became fairly active in those groups, in leading them. And during those times, at least once a year, I attended one of two Big Apple groups that existed in Cleveland, I guess to scout the friendly opposition. And when my career put me in a school, my first teaching job was an Apple shop. My laptop was getting old. I noticed at all the different training events that you go to as a teacher, and there's lots of them, that the people with Macs seem to get up faster and have things working quicker than people with PCs, even though I was pretty good at PCs. And it was at that time, 2006, when Apple rewrote their OS to sit atop a Unix variant, and I loved Unix. And they had switched to Intel, and I thought those were the superior hardware. And so I bought a MacBook Pro and looked for the Apple Club. And the one I found is the one I'm in now. I felt that I needed to get up and going really fast. There's nothing more embarrassing than being a teacher in front of a room full of kids or a room full of other teachers and having things not work. And the Apple Club was so welcoming, so warm, so helpful, especially to steering me to little add-on utility programs. It gave me the confidence and the skills I needed, and they had fabulous prizes. I think in the first 6 months I went to meetings, I probably won the raffle 4 times. So all the little gizmos and gadgets that I would attach to my computer helped me learn the guts of OS 10. So that's my experience.
Chris, you have been in some user groups. We got a lot of your history already, but some of the user groups that you were involved in?
Well, of course, Apple Corps of Dallas was the first one, and I became the HyperCard SIG leader there, special interest group. And shortly after that, I actually handed that off to my friend Carl de Cordova, who has been a lifetime friend, and he ran the HyperCard SIG, and I ran what I thought was going to be the up-and-coming desktop publishing SIG with the Laser Writer. And I was also doing some work with a lady named Blanche Dillon in Dallas who had a pre-press business. And, she taught me a lot about the whole pre-press industry and where the Mac fit into all of that. And, our SIGs would fill up with 20, 30, 40 people, so there was a lot of interest. And we had the good fortune to be in the Infomart in Dallas at the time. Also joined the MacPack user group in Richardson, which was more of a sort of a local friendly club, sort of one big meeting, asking questions and that sort of stuff. And I was also vice president of that club for a while before I went to work for Apple. And then in Austin, I joined the Capital Macintosh user group, which had Bob Levitas. So Carl de Cordova and Bob and I would often sit around talking. I remember one time it started raining, and we were so involved in the conversation that we were oblivious to the rain until, we started taking off our glasses because we couldn't see through them, and that was sort of the user group experience back in the day. And, moving to Tucson, now that I'm retired, I once again saw the user groups as a really beneficial to, keep me up to date on a lot of stuff, because I don't do all this. I don't do this stuff 9 to 5 anymore, and so keeping up with, of course, I read Mac Rumors religiously, and a few others, but, the user groups are wonderful for that. And once again, things are getting a little bit more complicated. We've got more devices. People are looking for help on iPhones, iPads, and I think everybody knows the rest of the story. Yeah, Bob Wood couldn't be with us tonight because they have their board meeting tonight, but he's president of the TMUG user group, and it's a great group. We have a lot of fun.
And
Dave, what about your experience?
yeah, as I mentioned, I got into Mac late, so I started around 2006. So a number of years, I was trying to learn it. We had a very small knit of Apple users at my work, so I really self-taught myself on that. And then I started hearing about Mac user groups. I didn't know anything about them. So right around 2009 or so, I discovered again back in those days in Chicago, it was called the Northwest of Us, and joined the group. And I found it to be interesting. There's a lot of, like I said, the shareware table and people presenting, and a lot of good camaraderie with everybody who just had like interests with that. So, and I quickly got into the group pretty quickly. I mean, I got on the board like within a year, and started getting involved in SIGs, and then I started up a iPhone SIG, which became hugely popular because obviously the iPhone became very, very popular when it first came out in 2007. But right around that time, 2010, 2011, that was when it was really taking off. So I really enjoyed doing that and did those SIGs. Also joined up with the past president there when and him and I worked together. We did like a WordPress SIG and networking SIG, the kind of thing. So we did that for a little while. So I got to do a lot of those things. Then he was ready to retire from being the president. So then I took it over. I did a lot of I helped redevelop the website. I really drove a lot of the folks that we really need as key people, being like especially a programs person, to try to get good speakers and top, and so we can have good people to speak. And a lot of times you wanted to use some of the folks that were within the group, but as the group aged and as people were kind of retiring and moving away, the group kind of dwindled because we kind of know what's been happening here with Mac user groups. So, but we had a good run. I ran all the way up to 2021, and that's how when I met everybody at MacStock, then starting to meet folks like Chuck Joyner and Dave Hamilton and Jeff Gamet and a lot of the other folks. I'm probably in that picture right there if I'm just sitting in that front row, because that's an older picture of one of the events there. So I was always very into the group and really enjoyed it, and like to get and work with our programs leads and try to get some of the best speakers you could get out there, because a lot of the folks that are in the Apple community do support Apple user groups. So with Jeff Gamet being one of my co-hosts on In Touch with iOS for a number of years now, Jeff and I are really good friends, and he's been very supportive with Apple user groups too. And I've joined him spoke with him at the Macintosh user group in Colorado. And he joined me when I just spoke earlier this year at Suburban Chicago Apple users. But as time progressed, my podcast was expanding, and I was just starting to, I was getting a little burnt out because leading a group and dealing with all the politics of the group, as well as the board and all the moving parts that happens in an Apple user group. It can be a bit of a challenge, but I had it was a great experience. I was able to really learn a lot of things, not only in my spare time being part of an Apple user group, but helping me in my career and excelling in my career. That's what had me start In Touch with iOS, because I was put on stage at MacStock, and like I said, I was up on stage. I wasn't a podcaster at that time. This is in 2015. I'm up there with Dave Hamilton. I'm up there with Chuck Joyner, Allison Sheridan, Guy Searle, Tim Robertson. All those folks are all seasoned podcasters. I'm up there like, oh my, I'm a president of a Mac user group, and I'm not one of your podcasters. So everybody was very welcoming at that time when I got up on stage and spoke for the very first time at MacStock, and Chuck was the first person. I always have this in my mind. Chuck Joyner, I said, boy, I don't even. I said when we were having our speaker discussion, I feel like I'm out of place here. I'm not a podcaster, and maybe I'll think about starting one. And Chuck says, "Oh, well, what are you doing on Tuesday?" So he was always so welcoming, and he's a great friend, and that's on YouTube too. I always like to go back and watch that once in a while on the MacStock YouTube channel. And Chuck Joyner and I are really good friends as well, and I've made a lot of friendships really via the Mac user groups, because Chuck did speak at the Chicago group, as well as Jeff has. Kelly Gomont, another gal who's been a seasoned veteran, have been podcasting. I'm good friends with her as well. and really that's what kind of sprouted me into the Mac user group area by having that opportunity. So now, I speak once in a while. I know the group is kind of dwindling in size, as I think a lot of groups are, unfortunately. But I mean, that's where we are with Mac user groups these days. But like I said, when I introduce myself here, that the internet really has taken over when it comes to getting help. I mean, there's not as much personalized help with folks these days, and a lot of times it's hard to get, especially to attract younger folks that are in those groups these days. I'm up there in age too, but you guys are a little older than me, but not by too far. But it is hard to get folks together to do these things, especially the younger kids with the advent of TikTok and all this other stuff that they do that we all were doing back in the old days with Mac user groups. But that's really where my experience was with Mac user groups. It's like I said, I look back and I'm proud of what I did with the group and was what I was able to accomplish. Whether it was good times and bad times. There were some bad times too, but overall, it was a very good experience.
Yeah, I'll take a minute and let you know my involvement is probably the young one here with Mac user groups. I joined maybe 8 years ago with Northeast Ohio Apple Corps, the same one that Peter's involved in, and that's how I know Peter. And that was pre-COVID, and so we were meeting once a month at the library, and people were sought out for presentations, and if you said yes, then you were probably going to be asked 10 more times for 10 more meetings to speak on something, to the point where I think it's no secret to Peter that it's sort of like, I've got to say no just because we need to get the group, people who don't feel they have the agency to be able to do this. There's no real trick about presenting at a Mac user group other than you do your research and you put some slides together maybe. And so trying to change the dynamic of the group so the group was more involved in the presentation process was frustrating. And then we moved to, we had COVID, and so the in-person meetings stopped. We started doing things on Zoom, and we started doing them weekly, which might have been to and unprogrammed, which might have been to the detriment of the group, in the sense that we quickly switched into what is more of a social and support group. And so we still meet every week. Or at least Zoom is open every week for people to join in. And the first round is, do you have any Mac questions? Which generally people move over rather quickly. And then the second round is, what's going on with you? And it turns more into a social networking situation. I have begun to join. I mean, how do I know Bob? How do I know Chris now? It's because I joined TUCSON T-Mug. I came to Macstock and saw a bunch of folks at Macstock from different groups. I met Tom Piper, who has passed on, who kind of organized a lot of the Apple Worldwide University user group and site.
He was president of Apple Jacks too.
Yeah, he was just a tremendous kind of motivator for that, and so. Things have changed with what people want out of community, but because everybody's online now, or many of the user groups are online, I have the opportunity to join other user groups. And so I do that just out of support of user groups, and because I have friends there and they occasionally ask me to speak, which is fun too, to kind of speak outside of your own element. So there are some good user groups out there that are really answering and tackling a lot of questions, and I pass some on to Peter. I say, take a look at this one, and so you can find user groups if you're interested in it, and you don't have one locally. You can find them online and join their meetings online virtually through Zoom if you want to. So that's sort of where I'm at with it now. They still provide a really good service. The really good ones provide a really good service to users. And it's a place where you can do your troubleshooting. I don't know if anybody else has comments sort of the state of where they are now.
Yeah, I can kind of tell you, I think they're kind of a dying breed. It's been that way for quite some time, unfortunately. And you saw some comments about some of the groups that are out there that are they're kind of in dire straits. We're at a peak of a couple hundred members. Now they're down to less than 50. To try to sustain that is very hard. Even though they may have funds in the bank, especially if they are meeting in person. Because in the case of Chicago, they're still meeting in person once a month, but they do a lot of Zoom meetings beyond that because they did continue on, like you said, with the pandemic. It's unfortunate that that they've lost a lot of folks. Again, it's kind of what happens is either folks they lose interest or people are passing away. I hate to say that's happening a lot too. But I just don't see how the future holds with Mac user groups these days. It's great to see. Like I spoke at TUCSON not too long ago. Bob's a great guy. I speak at the Silicon Valley user group out in California each year. I just spoke with those folks. They're really great. So they're smart and they take advantage of asking. All I got to do is ask all these great podcasters, people who are in the Apple community, and they're always welcome to want to speak at these groups. But unfortunately, you got folks who just don't have those skill sets to know how to go out there and get this great content, and that's hard because, believe me, it's a lot of work. I mean, I did it for over 11 years, and trying to come up with programs every month is very, very challenging.
Yeah.
To be able to have a great programs person, which I luckily had. I had a number of. One was being the programs guy for a long time. He finally had, as he was getting older, he decided he wanted to step back. We had one other guy that we had. It was absolutely amazing, and him and I worked really well together. And because I was really involved to making sure I wanted to have top-notch speakers, including myself, of course. Because and as all of us know, if you have a guy like me or others who are very knowledgeable, after time, you get a little burnt out. I mean, like I said, I think my iPhone SIG really, kind of branched out to what my podcast is today, because I was able to have that opportunity. I'm going in a hotel. We would do it on a Tuesday night in a local hotel. It was like a Holiday Inn Express or something in these rooms, and you know how bad those rooms can be in those hotels. And I set up all my computers and had everything going. And those times it was always a challenge to be able to mirror your iPhone onto a screen to project it on the screen so you could start showing things. But obviously it's a lot easier now. But it was fun because a lot of people. I would always get on average about 20 or 25 people would come to the SIG because I self-taught a lot of the knowledge I have. To have someone like me in an Apple user group it's unique. You don't see a lot of it, but some groups have some great people and others don't. They just kind of do what they can. Like you said, Marty, presenting is not for everybody. Not everybody likes to stand up in front of an audience and be able to speak. You can get scared really quickly when you do it. And I've done it plenty of times, whether at work, at MacStock, Apple user group, or any other experiences I've had. That's where I wish Mac user groups could learn from that. Because I think a lot of them do really well, but others, like you said, some of these groups like to get together and they just are talking, and it's like it's a social hour and a half, however long they meet. But I think the bottom line is what I'm saying is, I think it's a kind of slowly dissipating here, unfortunately.
Peter or
Yeah,
Chris,
you make me think about two things, and one is the way in which the internet has sort of fractured the stuff that I used to see at user groups. So in our user group now, we have a guy named JJ who loves to track his bike rides. If I go look on meetup.com, there's a whole group of people who do hiking and biking. There are bike clubs that meet in person. There are hiking clubs that meet in person. And some of what I used to hear at a Mac users group, I could go to there. With regard to programming, same thing. We have a very active Python users group in Cleveland, a very active R users group, and there are probably others that I don't know about just because they're not languages that interest me. And all of those sort of pull away from what was a central subject computer user group in the past. So that's one thing that I thought about while you were talking. But the other thing I was thinking about was I think the social aspect of groups is really important. So even though I'm pushing at our club to what Mac problems have you had, what Mac discoveries have you made, uh, for a long time I've been reading books by this guy named Robert Putnam. He started with a book called Bowling Alone, had others called Better Together, The Upswing, all about why joining clubs and getting together in groups is important, especially for age seasoned citizens like the members of this podcast, because it keeps us mentally stimulated. It puts more novelty in our life. It keeps you a little more agile uh, as you age. So there's a new movie out, and it's on Netflix. If you do that, and if you aren't on Netflix, I think there's a place called, what's it called, Gather, where you can rent it without signing up for a service, and it's called Join or Die, which sounds kind of dire, but it is all about how joining groups, getting together in person is like really important for not only health, but for the health of our society. So I would push that as much as I would push user groups, you know?
Yep.
Chris, you have last word?
Well, I'm also active with my camera club. In fact, I lead a wildlife special interest group in photography, and we meet almost every week with the different special interest groups and our main meeting twice a month and stuff. And I was a big advocate of Zoom, to definitely continue over Zoom with COVID. And it worked great because everybody had a front row seat, could see, could hear. It was wonderful. However, when we finally got together after COVID, it was quite an experience, to see people again and, they in 3D space, as we said. But I think there's another thing here too, not to be overlooked, in that there's a value add happening with everything we're talking about tonight in terms of podcasts. People can listen to this podcast, they can listen to a whole variety of other podcasts. I know there are about half a dozen photography podcasts I listen to, and I like to listen to them in the car. And there can be a lot of value given in those podcasts. And maybe some of the viewers will think about joining those clubs. And maybe we should all evangelize and say, hey, if you like what you're hearing and you've been listening to us for a while, you could join and become a member and share some of your wisdom with us. And so that may be a new way. And I think we also nowadays have to physically plan out a physical get together. I mean, we have to sit down and hammer it out and everybody agree on a day. And for one thing, it's nice because it's often during the day, and a lot of these podcasts and Zoom meetings and such are on at night. And, I don't know about you guys, I'm 77 now, I keep forgetting to say that, but, I'm obviously not as sharp as I am first thing in the morning with that nice big cup of coffee. So, I try to convince people to have SIG meetings during the day, but nobody wants to. So we go out and shoot pictures, I guess. But,
Yeah,
so there are a couple of angles here.
Yeah. David and I think when you were talking about the necessity of just getting together, I think that's the big excitement for MacStock, for David and I. A couple of days where you're getting together and, it's just excitement. And I teach group work. That's part of the curriculum that I teach in the counseling program. So the idea that the necessity of having those kind of human group interactions instead of over the internet or over TikTok. And I'm going to try a different angle at this, particularly for folks who are younger. If they're really very in a digital world and they're communicating that way and they're engaging in that way, they're not having the opportunity to engage in sort of the human connecting group work stuff that Peter talked about and that Chris alluded to, and that David talks about when he talks about getting together with people and people that he's met and known. We could sell that aspect. Here is a job skill set that you're not going to get by watching TikTok. In terms of in-face Mac user groups or Mac stock, things like that. So I think there's still a lot of value in them. I know the ones that I go to, there's always like an hour of question and answers. I've got this problem. Can somebody help me with? So they are a great resource, and they are mainly seasoned citizens that are asking those questions, but still that's inviting for people who are our age and older to be able to ask those kind of questions in the groups. I know we're going long, so I'm just going to say, how do you find them? Simply a Google search. You can find and locate groups. That's how I found the one that I went to in Strongsville, the Northeast Ohio Apple Core. And that's how I found the other ones that were around when I decided I needed to get a little bit more of my Apple fix. So I started exploring other Mac user groups and finding them online and being able to do that. So, that would be my suggestion for any listener. At least try and find one. They're not expensive. I think even I was just looking at the Silicon Valley because I heard of it, and I know you presented there, but I was curious about, you think Silicon Valley, it's going to be, and it looked like an interesting group, but there was no charge.
It's small. There's no charge. Yeah.
No
They used to
charge.
meet at Google. They had the facility at Google, but now they moved everything to exclusively on Zoom now. So
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. And then most of them are like $20 a year. So it's well worth the cost. I think we've stopped asking for donations because we're meeting on Zoom exclusively. We do have a library meeting occasionally, but folks are preferring the Zoom meeting, and we have enough in the bank that we don't have to worry about funding or funds for now for Northeast Ohio. I will put in the show notes, both in the YouTube video and also in the podcast. The show notes will have links to various user groups that you might want to check out, including the ones that we've spoken about here and the ones that we're members of or have been members of. So that'll be part of the group. Any final words from anybody?
Good.
Hearing none, let's wrap up this episode. We aim to record on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can watch this crew on YouTube at youtube.com at the Old Mac Gang. And we'll use the site if there are any changes in the recording time, but we've been able to manage 9 o'clock on Wednesdays and pull in enough people to have our group. Our music bed is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks, Dave, for joining us tonight. And
thank you for having me.
we will count the days until you're 60. Well, it's probably another 15, 20 years till your 65th birthday. So
20 years. Oh, shorter than that.
So it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Find all of his stuff on In Touch with iOS. I'll put the link again in the show notes. Listen to him on Thursdays and also on Mac Voices. A lot of great information in the material that he does. And I'm kind of glad you moved out of the Mac user group sphere and into the more public podcasting venture.
Yeah, me
So
too.
thanks for joining us, Dave, and then our regulars, Peter and Chris. Gary couldn't be here tonight, and Bob, as Chris had said, is at the board meeting for the TUCSON team. So that's it for the show. Thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang, and see you next time.